Thanks for joining us here at the National Weather Service in Lubbock, Texas. I'm meteorologist Gary Squirra, and today we're going to look back at the weather of 2014 for the South Plains region. Probably the biggest thing in 2014, weather-wise, was the increased precipitation that we saw over the past few years. What we have here plotted are the precipitation totals for 2014. These are courtesy of the West Texas Mesonet and the Cooperative of Observer Sites from around the region. And you can see many locations saw precipitation totals for the year up near or in excess of 20 inches, which was a vast improvement for most locations over the past few years. Another way to view that is as a percentage of normal, which you can see here with the green values being above average precipitation for the year and the brown values being slightly below average. And what you can note is many locations up on the Caprock, especially across the South Plains, did see rainfall totals at or near long-term averages, whereas off the Caprock into the rolling plains and the southeast panhandle, as well as portions of the southwest panhandle up around Friona, and then in the far southwestern South Plains, values were slightly below average, though still much improved over the past few years. This rainfall did have impacts on the ongoing drought that we've been mired in over the past several years. What we're looking at here in the upper left is the drought status for Texas at the beginning of 2014, and you can see up in northwest Texas, much of the region was mired in a moderate to severe drought with extreme to exceptional drought in some pockets. And this actually worsened with time through the first part of 2014. If you remember, much of the first 4 months, January through April, are very dry, and even the first part of May was quite dry. By mid-May, most of northwest Texas was mired in extreme to exceptional drought, the worst category there is. Thankfully, the rain really picked up in late May and continued for the most part on through the remainder of the year, and then you can see where we ended 2014 regarding the drought status. Many locations, especially up on the Caprock, either found themselves with no drought or just abnormally dry conditions, so greatly improved from that exceptional drought in early to mid-May. Out in the rolling plains and the eastern panhandle, they did see improvement as well, though not quite as significant, with many locations still mired in some severity of drought, moderate to severe for the most part. Unfortunately, those in the eastern Cottle County were still in the exceptional drought. Now looking at the temperatures throughout the year, overall the year finished very close to average, and we have the plots with regards to normal, departures from normal, of the daily temperatures throughout the year, and then that yellow line is the 10-day running mean, gives you kind of a feel for the longer term trends throughout the year. And you can see obviously a lot of variability, as you always have from day to day. But if you look at that yellow trace, you can see that early February was particularly cool, and then much of the latter half of February was quite warm. And then we also started March on the cool side, but then beyond that it was close to average with your ups and downs. Until we got to late August, we did have a warm stretch there, and it was a fairly dry stretch as well. And then a lot more variability, followed by a very cool stretch, which you may be able to remember in the middle part of November, where it got quite cold, at least for November. And then much of December finished on a warm note until the very end of the year, when we did have that cool stretch that's persisted well into 2015. Here's a map showing some of the noteworthy events from 2014 around the region. I won't dwell on this, but there were a few notable things. Early in the year, February 2nd, we had some heavy snow fall over the rolling plains. 5 to 10 inches were quite common. In addition, there was a fair amount of lightning, so some people experienced thunder snow, which is a fairly rare thing. And a few spots even saw upwards of a foot of snow. Then, of course, we had our late May rains when 4 to 8 inches or more fell across a good chunk of the South Plains region. And we only had 2 tornadoes, both of them weak, at least that we officially were able to confirm in 2014. One occurred on April 20th up in Childress County, the eastern part of Childress County. Thankfully, it did no damage that we're aware of. It was out over open field. And we also had a tornado in the open country down near sundown on May 26th, and thankfully that didn't do any damage that we're aware of either. Otherwise, there are several other severe thunderstorms, and we did start the year dry with a number of dust storms. Now we'll take a look back at a few of the noteworthy events in 2014. As I just mentioned, early in the year we did have quite a dry stretch, and we had a number of dust storms. Here's a few of them that we can look at. One on March 11th with a cold front racing southward brought this wall of dust, this haboob, to the Muleshoe area. And then just a week later, we had a similar event with a cold front racing south. You can see that satellite animation. What you see is the blowing dust racing southward out of Colorado and even southwest Kansas through the panhandles and across the South Plains and Rolling Plains. And then on April 3rd, we also had a cold front move through and bring some more dust, and we had several other wind and dust events as well. So kind of a rough start to the year. Thankfully, that all took a turn for the better, at least for those of us that didn't want West Texas to turn into a desert. Memorial Day weekend, the extended weekend, we did see an upper-level storm system slowly approach from the west, and it worked with plenty of Gulf moisture to bring us widespread rain, several rounds of rain, and heavy rains at that. The upper right graphic shows the rain totals over that stretch in late May. Many locations saw 4 inches or more over that period, with some spots even seeing 6 inches or more. And you can see it did cause some troubles. On the lower left, there's some flooding in Lubbock on May 26th. And some eerie sight as the storm clouds came rolling in as well, as you can see in that one graph, or one picture. But overall, the impacts weren't too negative, and we saw it definitely helped ease our drought. So overall, very beneficial wet period in late May. 2014 had some severe weather. It was a little bit subdued in comparison to your average year, but we did have severe weather and kind of peaked in early June, particularly on June 7th when we saw a lot of fairly intense thunderstorms roaming the South Plains region. You can see a few different pictures from the destruction and what fell during that day, mostly during the evening and overnight hours. Baseball-sized hail fell sundown, maybe even a little bit bigger hail there. In the lower left, you can see a picture of that and some of the impacts that it caused. In the upper right, a vehicle that windshield was smashed up, and a lot of homes were damaged, and vehicles, of course, damaged by that large hail. We also had a really intense thunderstorm go down Highway 84 from near Muleshoe to Sudan, and then even rolled down toward Lubbock. It produced some very strong winds. Never were able to confirm a tornado, but at least some very strong straight line winds that did a lot of damage just southeast of Muleshoe, as you can see in that center picture. And then as that storm rolled further to the southeast, it went just south and west of Lubbock, at least the main impacts of it. Produced a very strong wind gust at the West Texas Mesonet near Wolfforth, over 90 miles an hour. And you can see it completely destroyed a travel trailer. Then later in the year, as we went into fall, we also had another wet stretch. This was in mid-September, and this was partly due to this tropical cyclone Odile, which was out in the eastern Pacific. It was no longer a tropical system by the time it approached West Texas, but it did bring plentiful amounts of moisture up into the southern high plains by mid-September, and then it just kind of stalled out here and gave us numerous rounds of very heavy rain. These rains did cause some flooding in spots. You can see in the lower right, that's Playa Lake in the Brownfield area that was spilling over. And after one particularly heavy rain event on September 24th during the evening hours, Marcia Sharp Freeway did flood. That was up by the Texas Tech campus. And you can see in the lower left here, these are some of the rainfall totals from that mid-September heavy rain stretch. And you can see a lot of spots saw 2 to 4 inches, a number of places with over a half a foot of rain over that week or longer period. And there was one place down in Gale where they had a particularly intense rainfall, especially one morning where they recorded over a foot of rain in just a few hours period. Did cause a lot of flooding there, but it also helped to fill up some reservoirs. So there were some good and some not so good with the heavy rains, but overall it did keep moisture in our soils, so that helped further ease our drought situation And just a few final remarks before we wrap up. 2004, as we saw, did bring above normal precipitation to much of the South Plains. That did help ease the drought in this area. Not quite as much rainfall in adjacent sections to the South Plains out in the Rolling Plains and the Eastern Panhandle, but still more rainfall than we've seen over the past few years, and that did help at least ease the drought somewhat, although not completely erode it. Temperatures on average did come out very close to normal for the entire year. We had our warm and cool periods, as is always the case, but overall it was just slightly warmer than the long-term average. And then the severe weather season overall was generally subdued, but we still had our big thunderstorms that brought some localized large hail, damaging winds, and flooding. Kind of peaked in early June, and June 7th in particular was our biggest severe weather day of the year. If you'd like more information on the weather events of 2014 for the South Plains, Rolling Plains, and Southern Panhandle region, I'd encourage you to visit these two URLs, two websites below, and you can surely get your fill. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and at YouTube. Thank you for listening. I hope you found this interesting.